Hilchos Korban Pesach Perek Chamishi, the laws of the Passover sacrifice, chapter 5. We're moving now to the halachas of Pesach Sheni. The last couple of chapters we mentioned in passing the idea of Pesach Sheni, that if you miss the first round, you get a second chance 1 month later. But now we're going to get into the specifics of that law. Of course, the story of Pesach Sheni is clear in the Torah. Hashem originally only gave one time for the Korban Pesach, on the day before actual Pesach. Then there were some Jews who were impure. They touched a dead body and they couldn't bring the Passover in time. And they asked Moshe Rabbeinu, Lama nigara? Why should we lose out just because we had to be impure for whatever reason? So Moshe Rabbeinu asked Hashem, and Hashem said, you know what? That's a good point. And from now on, there's going to be a new mitzvah, Pesach Sheni. 1 month after Pesach, anybody who missed the first Pesach for whatever reason, specific reasons, he can do a second time. Not exactly. It's a little bit different. For example, you're allowed to have chametz in your house. You don't have to clean out the chametz. There's different rules that are related to the Pesach Sheni. We're going to see about them. But you do have to bring a Korban Pesach, matzah, v'maror. Yeah, the whole story of the Haggadah, I don't think you have to do. But definitely the ceremony part remains the same. The thing is, it's not like every time you miss the first Pesach, you can bring a second one. You can only make it up if the first time you missed it was for an honest reason. If you were purposeful on the first time around, then you lose out. The interesting thing is that if you miss bringing a Korban Pesach, you get karet, you get excision, which is one of the worst punishments. The neshama gets cut off and you die early. But in some cases, if you get to bring a second Korban Pesach, you can absolve yourself from the karet for the first time around. So that's also going to be discussed today, in which scenarios you get excision and which scenarios you don't get excision. Of course, it's Sunday morning, shul is a little bit noisy, so forgive the background noise. It says the Rambam halacha aleph, misha haya tamei b'shas shchitas haPesach. If somebody was impure when the time of slaughtering the Korban Pesach came, she'ein sheichatin alav, which means that you cannot slaughter for him. He can't be part of a group because he cannot eat the Passover sacrifice. Or he was far away, and we'll define what far away means later. Point is, he was too far, he couldn't come to Yerushalayim in time to bring the Korban Pesach. Or some other circumstance beyond his control happened to him. Or he was, by mistake, he just forgot it's Pesach. He didn't realize he had to put away an animal. He makes a mistake, and again, all for an honest reason. He doesn't end up offering the first Korban Pesach. He gets a make-up chance. He can bring a Korban Pesach on the 14th of the second month, that's Iyar, in the afternoon. Slaughtering this Passover sacrifice is a separate positive commandment. And it even overrides Shabbos. If Pesach Sheni is on Shabbos, you can bring the second Passover on Shabbos. That's how important it is. The Rambam says a very core principle here. The second Passover is not a make-up for the first one.
The second Passover.
It's a Yom Tov on its own. Of course, it only comes into play if you missed the first one. But in its inherent definition, it's a separate holiday, which leads to a very interesting halacha. Leficha chayavin alav kares. Therefore, you could become liable to excision for missing Pesach Sheni. In other words, I mean, we'll get a bunch of examples now, but just to think about it, let's just say you missed the first Pesach for an honest reason, and then you had a chance to make up the second, and you missed it purposely. Now it's a separate Yom Tov. So you're going to get excision for it, for missing that. We're going to have actually 4 examples. You can see it over here in the chart. Ketzad, what's the practical application of all this? Misha shogag oinenas v'lo hikriv barishan. Okay, first Pesach, we have shogeg oines. Either inadvertent or it was circumstances beyond his control. He didn't bring the first offering. Im hazid v'lo hikriv basheni, if the second time round, when he could have made it up, he was purposeful and missed it, chayav kares. Now he gets excision, soul gets cut off. V'im shogag oinenas af basheni potter. If there's an honest reason again why you missed it the second time, then of course you're exempt. Same way you were exempt from missing the first time, you're also exempt from missing the second time. Hazid v'lo hikriv barishan. Watch this. You were purposeful. You purposely missed the first Korban Pesach. Hashem still gives you a second chance. Harei ze makriv basheni. He can bring it the second time round. Just here, he's treated a little bit more stringently.
You have
V'im loy hikriv b'sheni, if he misses the second time, afal pisha shagag, even if he's inadvertent, now there's no off the hook. Harei zechai of kares, you are going to be liable to excision now. Shaharei loy hikriv korban Hashem b'mayadai v'haya mezid. At least at one of the times, when it was the proper time to bring the sacrifice, you didn't bring it and you were acting purposefully. So yes, if you were purposeful the first time around, we'll give you a chance to repair it second time around. But if you don't repair it, I don't care what happens the second time, we go back to the first time and we say, hey, you missed it on purpose, you're getting kares. Aval, but misha haya tameh, oy b'derech rechoika, v'lei asa es harishayin, if somebody was impure or far away and didn't do the first one, not because of an inadvertent, shegeg or einas, the first case, is a case where you were in Jerusalem, everything was good, just something else happened. I don't know, you tripped and you broke your foot, you had to go to the hospital and you couldn't bring the Korban Pesach. So shegeg and einas is different than tameh and derech rechoika. Shegeg and einas means everything was going right for you, you just missed it. So then the second time round, if you're mazed, you get kares. But if you were in the conditions which Torah says clearly, you were impure or you were far away, and therefore you missed the first one, afal pisha hazid basheni, even if you were purposeful on the second one, ein chayav kares, you're not liable to excision. Shekvar niftar bepesach rishon min hakares. Since you fulfilled the exact Torah stipulations, you were impure or far away, that completely exempts you from kares. And so whatever happens later doesn't hold you accountable for that. Halacha gimel misha b'derech rechoika. Let's say somebody was far away, but the people in your group, they didn't know. They thought you're coming on time to the Seder. They didn't know you're far away. It's before WhatsApp, before email, you couldn't get a hold of him. And they slaughtered and sprinkled the blood for you. They had you in mind when they slaughtered. You registered on the group, exactly. Afal pisha bala erev, says the Rambam, even if he shows up in the evening, he was too far away when it was time for slaughtering, but he was walking for the next 6 hours. He walked and walked and walked, and he made it in time for the evening. Loy hurtza. It doesn't make a difference. It's not accepted. V'chayav b'pesach sheni, and he's obligated to bring a second Korban Pesach, because when the time of slaughtering, that's the operative time, by the way, we're going to see. It's not about where you are by the Seder. It's about where you are when it was time to slaughter it. If you were far then, I don't care what happens afterwards, you are out of the loop.
How do they define this far?
Oh, we're going to see that in the end of the chapter. Halacha daled tamei sheyochel litaher b'pesach rishon. Let's say a person was impure, and if he tried, he would have been able to become pure in time for the first Korban Pesach. Shaloi taval, but he chooses not to go to the mikveh. Elo yoshav b'tum asay ad sha'avar zman hakorban. He purposely stays in his impure state until the time of the Passover sacrifice passes. V'chein arel shaloi mol ad sha'avar zman hakorban, or a person uncircumcised. Again, he could have circumcised himself. If he wanted to, he could have got it done. He purposely didn't until the time passes. Harei zemezid barisha, and he goes into this category. Purposeful on the first Korban Pesach. Lefichach, therefore, if he misses the second one, even inadvertently, he's liable to excision, because not doing something when you could have taken action is itself considered a purposeful transgression. Halacha hey, talking about the bris, the same way, giving yourself a bris is essential to making a Korban Pesach. Kach milas banav haktanim umilas kol avadav. So too, your young children and all your slaves, bein g'dolim, bein ktanim, adult or child, ma'akeves oisai, hold you back. It's essential. If all your kids don't have a bris, or all your slaves don't have a bris, you cannot bring a Korban Pesach. Shenemar, as it says in the verse of the Korban Pesach, himoy loy chol zachar va'oz yikrav la'asoisai. You must circumcise for him all the males, meaning all the males in his house who are under his jurisdiction, and only then can he come close to bringing the Korban Pesach. If you would slaughter it before circumcising them, the whole sacrifice would be disqualified. If you have female maidservants, usually when a Jew buys a servant or a maidservant, he would always put them in the mikveh. Am hotav. Ama ivriya, a maidservant. Am hotav is plural, maids. So usually when a person would buy a servant, you have to put him in the mikveh as a kind of a half a conversion. So if you have female maidservants and you did not put them in the mikveh, as you usually do when buying a servant, me'akavte, that holds him back. It's essential. He cannot make the Korban Pesach. V'davar zeh mipi Kabbalah. This is not clearly in the Torah, but it's tradition from Moshe Rabbeinu. Shahatvila lishvachais kamila la'avadim. Maidservants going to the mikveh is like bris for the servants. Same way servants' bris is essential, maidservants' mikveh is essential. Halacha vav hakatan. If there's a child under bar mitzvah, who we said the other day could join a group. They cannot have a whole group of children, but it can be part of a group. Ein milas avadav utvilas shivchaisav ma'akavta milihimanes ala Pesach. If the child owns servants or maidservants, a Talmud scenario for this is a father passes away and leaves his whole estate to his kid, and the only kid is a child, so now he owns these servants and maidservants. He doesn't have to make sure that they get a bris or go to the mikveh before registering to a Korban Pesach. Shenemar, because it says, V'chol eved ish, the slave of any man, lohitzi esakata, and this excludes a child. If the slave is owned by a man, the man has to make sure he gets a bris. Owned by a child, not necessarily. Halacha Zayin, ger shenizgayer ben Pesach Rishon lePesach Sheni. This is one of the most controversial laws in all of the Rambam. There's discussion on this to the moon and back. Just going to give you the gist of it. Ger shenizgayer ben Pesach Rishon lePesach Sheni. If a convert converts between the first and second Pesach, v'chein katan shehigdil ben shnei Pesachim, or a child becomes bar mitzvah between the two Pesachs. He's born between the first and second Pesach, so his bar mitzvah year is between first and second. Chayavin laseis Pesach Sheni. This is unbelievable. They're obligated to make a Pesach Sheni in time.
I would have been
Okay, makes sense.
I would have been on the third of Iyar.
Third of Iyar. So you would have been exactly the scenario. Chayavin laseis Pesach Sheni. Even though when the first Pesach came around, they weren't even able to bring the Korban Pesach because they were a goy or a young child. Nevertheless, now that there's Pesach Sheni coming up, they have to do it. And it actually connects to the beginning of the chapter where the Rambam says that Pesach Sheni is its own holiday. If it was only a makeup for the first, you can understand. If you missed the first, you make up a second. If you didn't miss the first, you don't make up a second. But since it's its own holiday, you have to make a second Pesach. And now the Rambam goes even further, he says, V'im shachatu alav bar ishain pater. If the group slaughtered for the child at the first Pesach when he was still not bar mitzvah, he's exempt from making the second Korban Pesach. And this throws all the commentaries for a field day. How could a child obligation fulfill an adult obligation? You want to say a child can fulfill his obligation, fine, while he's a child. But now that he becomes bar mitzvah, in between the two Korban Pesachs, we should say, hey, what you did before was as a child. Now, you got to do it on your own as an adult. How could he be exempt? Not to get too into it, but the Rebbe has a long talk on this. Just give you the bottom line. It's a lot of complex detail, but the bottom line is the Rebbe says it's very possible that according to the Rambam, when a child is under bar mitzvah and he's obligated to do mitzvahs because of chinuch, what we call training, even though it's the father's obligation to facilitate that the child do mitzvahs, but the obligation is that the child should do mitzvahs in their proper way. So because the father has to facilitate for his child to do mitzvahs in the proper way, in a way, the child has his own obligation. And because he has his own obligation, that could help for the Pesach Sheni. This is just in very short,
It's really a beautiful
but it's a fascinating approach. And he proves it from multiple places in the Rambam, that what's called mitzvahs shemishum chinuch. Mitzvahs that the child does as a training becomes like a full mitzvah. Halacha ches, nashim shenidchu lasheni. What about a woman? We said in the beginning that both men and women are obligated in the Korban Pesach. So what if a woman is pushed off to the second Passover? She missed the first one for whatever reason. Whether it's a circumstance beyond their control, or it's an inadvertency, or it's an impurity, or it's a distant way. They don't have an obligation to bring a second Passover. It's optional. If they want, they can slaughter. If they don't want, they don't have to slaughter. Women. Therefore, therefore, if Pesach Sheni is on Shabbos, we don't make a group just for them, because that would be desecrating Shabbos for an optional thing. If she's part of a group, that's permitted. Now we have to define what's far. We keep saying you're far away, you're far away. What's called far away? 15 mil outside the wall of Jerusalem. So this is a little depiction here. This is Jerusalem's wall. A mil today is roughly a mile. So call it 15 miles away from Jerusalem, outside the wall. Again, during the time of slaughter, you're far. Yeah, this is probably not that far out. Just giving you a depiction of what it would mean to see Yerushalayim. You might even be close enough to see it, but you're miles away. You're considered far. Halacha tes misha haya beinayu bein Yerushalayim. Yoim arba asar im aliyas hashemesh. If somebody, on sunrise of the 14th of Nisan, between him and Jerusalem there is chamisha asar mila yaser, 15 miles or more, harei derech rechaika, that's called a far distance. Haya beinayu beina paches mizeh. If there's less than that, einay bederech rechaika, he should know that he's not far away. Mipnei sheyachal lahagia l'Yerushalayim achar chatzos k'sheyahalech beraglav benachas. The Rambam says, scientifically speaking, empirically speaking, you could walk to Jerusalem and get there after midday, which is when they begin to slaughter the Korban Pesach, even if you walked nicely. Benachas is like calmly. You'll get there. If you tried walking, but you didn't reach Yerushalayim because there were so many animals. Think about it. It's Erev Pesach. Everyone's walking with their sheep to Yerushalayim. That's why you didn't get there. Or let's say you were even in Jerusalem, but you had sick feet. You needed a wheelchair or whatever it is. And you only reached temple courtyard after the time has passed. You are called in a circumstance beyond your control. You're not far away. Says the Rambam further, somebody was in prison outside the wall of Jerusalem, but the guards promised to free him in the evening. They can slaughter the sacrifice for him, the Korban Pesach. And when he goes out in the evening, he can eat from the Korban Pesach because he was close enough, and they promised him to go out. But that's only if it was imprisoned in the hands of Jews. They'll keep their word. If it was idol-worshipping Gentiles, you can never trust their guarantee till they fulfill it. You cannot slaughter him till he leaves. After the fact, if they didn't care, they still slaughtered for him and he left, then he can eat from the Korban Pesach. If he doesn't end up getting out, he's exempt from making a second Pesach, because at the end of the day, it was slaughtered for him. Also, if you have a person in deep mourning, relative passed away that day in the morning, person who's sick or old, and he can eat a kazayas, and they slaughter the Korban Pesach for them. After the blood was sprinkled, they became impure. So a different circumstance now is causing them not to be able to eat. They're exempt from the second Passover because when it was slaughtered, it was all in good faith. It was in good circumstance, and therefore they're totally exempt from the second Passover.